How did this man, who trained to be a doctor and later a lawyer, end up being called one of the most dangerous men in the world? This is Anjem Choudary, nicknamed Andy by his university mates. Here he is. Back in the day, he was known as a lady-loving man who enjoyed smoking cannabis and downing pints of cider. A fairly typical university life. But there was a turning point that made him focus on radical Islamism. We'll find out a bit later what that was. He's just been released from prison with some of the tightest restrictions on the way he can live. Things like not being able to leave London, being banned from using the internet, and only meeting up with people who have been approved by police. But why all the rules? Well, let's rewind and go back more than 20 years. Anjem Choudary was a regular sight on street corners, mosques, embassies and police stations around the country. He'd stand there with a loud hailer trying to drive a wedge between Muslims and the rest of Britain. He appeared to enjoy the media spotlight, often greeting journalists with a smile.
Anjem Choudary wasn't scared of meeting journalists. He needed journalists to help spread his message, and for many years he had a love-hate relationship with reporters. I remember one particular incident when he was under direct investigation from the Metropolitan Police in the lead up to his eventual conviction. And Choudary was so delighted we were there to film him because he believed he was going to get on that night's news. We hadn't made a decision whether we were going to use it, that he decided to start buying us sweets. And I came back with 3 boxes of sweets to the newsroom, none of which anyone wanted to eat. But this was the measure of the man. He wanted to charm you and bring you in as a means of helping to actually get his story out there.
So if I'm out on the streets, I will call for Islam. I'll call for Islam in my home. I'll do it on the internet. If I'm in prison, I will continue to call for Islam. You know, it's not going to stop me enjoining good and forbidding evil and exposing the British foreign policy and the British government.
If you were to give Choudary a bomb recipe, he wouldn't even know where to start. Instead, he used the ingredients of hate and division to pour into the minds of a band of followers who hung on his every word.
British soldiers go to hell!
His direct contact with men like Michael Adebolajo, who went on to kill Fusilier Lee Rigby in 2013, is just one example of how it's thought his words inspired direct actions of terror. But how did he get from that wild university student to convicted terrorist?
During university, he started to have a bit of a religious awakening. He got involved with a man called Omar Bakri Muhammad, a radical preacher from Syria who was effectively pushing an extreme world view and trying to recruit for his growing movement of young men and women who followed his cause, which was that there should be a form of Islamic rule starting in the Middle East and then spreading across the world. It was only after 9/11 happened that things really started to change, because all of a sudden there was this group in the UK which was effectively lauding what had happened.
The journey to Chowdary's arrest has been a long one, 20 years.
Is a credit to all the hard work over many, many years that has gone into monitoring preachers of hate.
Other than a minor conviction, he's remained on the right side of the law. That's until June 2014. Choudary was found guilty of inviting support of the so-called Islamic State group, with a sentence of 5.5 years. Police say Chowdary's followers carried out attacks in the UK and abroad. One of terrorism police's biggest headaches was silence, at least for now.
When in 2014 the Islamic State militant group really came to prominence during the Syrian civil war, this was a moment of truth for Anjem Choudary and his supporters, because here was a group that effectively claimed it had unified 2 countries, Syria and Iraq, and created what it said was a genuine Islamic State. And this was exactly the thing that Choudary and his core supporters have been calling for many years. Came under such immense pressure from his disciples that he held a special meeting with them to look at all the evidence as he saw it. And he came out concluding that this was a genuine Islamic State. It fulfilled his criteria. And that meant that he then effectively had to invite others to support that Islamic State. And that was the moment of his downfall.
Now, Choudary is 51. He's been released. Not because he's considered no longer a threat, but because he's served half of his sentence. Whilst he's on licence, he faces up to 25 strict conditions. He's banned from preaching at certain mosques, associating with certain people, and even leaving the M25. So the question about how dangerous he is remains to be answered.
There's no doubt that security chiefs regard Anjem Choudary as one of the most dangerous men in Britain. The bigger issue perhaps is the thoughts he put out there, the extremism which he helped to popularise and helped spread through the internet. Those kind of ideas are everywhere. Time and again, month after month, I'm at the Old Bailey listening to major counter-terrorism prosecutions, and you see these details come up. You see lines in the lives of counter-terrorism suspects, which have originally come from Anjem Choudary's mouth many years ago. And that's the bigger challenge, actually, for detectives and security services, is actually how do you kill that idea?